1 hour of one day is not much. Small sample size.
Sure.
But it's also new information, and the stock market is open. Welcome to The Beat. It is a Woody Wednesday presented by the Waterworks. He's Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. Stocks are up, baby.
Stocks are up. There were so many new faces that Ohio State had to put the players' names on the back bumper of their helmet.
I think it's just fanciness.
I think it's awesome, but it's something we've never seen. I was watching the offensive lineman on Tuesday. I'm like, why does that say Daniels on the back of his helmet? And I realized that it says it on everyone. I'm like, this is great. I hope that they continue to do that. And I think they should put like social media handles on the back once the season comes. If we're at the point in college football where we're going to give like Kroger a jersey patch, I think we need to let the players just really fully lean into finding ways to whore themselves out to the world with their social media and branding.
I don't think social media is the way. Why don't you just give them your Venmo QR code, put that on the helmet, and
I don't know how
pay them directly.
It would not be easy for people to get to use that QR code because players move a lot.
Okay, well, we're really getting off track right away for
Either
stocks.
way, great first day of practice at Ohio State. Lots of new players to talk about, lots of improving players to talk about, and so stocks are going to be bumping.
Yeah, so we alluded to this on Snappy J's on Tuesday. I think we would both have to say, and if we're going to share it, let's just start with Leroy Roker, who gets to break down the team. We brought him up on the live show on Monday, playing against Miami, getting on the field, where he was in the pecking order. He was retained for a reason, and then he was picked by Ryan Day and the coaching staff for a reason to get in there and set the tone on day one of spring camp. It's not nothing. It's a stock.
Yeah, it's not nothing, but I also think we want to be very, very clear. The expectation come week one is that Jalen McClain, Earl Little, and Terry Moore are the starting safeties for this team. So it's like
you got to have a fourth one.
On a team that is replacing so many players, having consistent leadership from the guys that are returning, having guys who are willing to step up and emerge and be vocal leaders on a team that is looking for players like Julian Sayin to be more vocal, who was on Tuesday. He did a nice job on Tuesday, I thought. But having a guy like Leroy Roker that you don't expect to step into that role, I think is vital for this team. And Ryan Day talked after his press conference, after practice during his press conference on Tuesday, about how, they're trying to find guys who are going to take over and be the heart and soul of this team, really. And it starts in the weight room, and that's where Leroy earned his stripes. But he's a good athlete, a really special athlete. And I think the more opportunity he gets out here, the more his teammates are going to be like, hey, that guy's actually a dude, and we can count on him. Now, again, does that mean he's a starter? No, not necessarily. But does it mean that he should be ignored or dismissed as a also-ran because he was a 3-star recruit 2.5 years ago? No. This is a guy that the Ohio State staff loves. And if you look back in the last few years of Ohio State football, guys like Xavier Johnson, who Ryan Day brought up on Tuesday, you don't always have to be the 5-star. You don't always have to be the guy that is the every down snap leader on defense to make an impact. And so just Leroy Roker is not someone that should be dismissed.
He was certainly a factor in the plans in the Cotton Bowl. He was playing in the dime. And even if that's all he does, quote unquote, all, that's the baseline, that is your role going into the season, it's a long season. I know that we're already getting into this, but Ryan Day's talked about going through the wars of the schedule and trying to make sure that they're still playing their best football to get into the playoff. If you're going to be playing 16 games against the caliber of opponents that Ohio State has, you're probably going to need more than 3 safeties.
There's games against Texas and USC and Oregon, games that we haven't seen.
The reigning national champions,
Indiana,
got to get some respect.
There are teams in the last handful of years where the Buckeyes are going to play one team that can throw the ball. That's not the case this year. You're going to play some teams that can wing it. So having another guy emerge already is pretty important.
Yeah, and it's starting at that point, which is where he left off against Miami, and now building on that throughout spring football. Does that mean that I think the stock is he's going to take a starting job? No, I think watching Terry Moore move around and showing no ill effects of the injury, the ACL at the end of that 2024 season at Duke, he looked good physically, looked apart. We know what the grades for him have been. We've talked about that throughout the last 2 months. Earl Little is, if he's as close to a plug-and-play transfer as I think you're going to find.
Yeah. He looked really
excited to see what that role looks like for him because, as I mentioned, coming out of last week, not probably just someone Ohio State will definitely not pigeonhole him into a role at nickel. He can move all around the secondary. So all that's exciting. And I don't think that they would necessarily lose their place to Leroy Roker, but they need him to contribute to that group for it to reach its full potential. I think he probably will.
Do you feel like we should take this stock watch and break it apart and say, here's some of the new faces and here's some of the old faces? Or should we just 1 through 110 it? Because there's so many guys. And again, I don't want to dismiss players who I think really made a change, like Edric Houston, who I mentioned on Snap Judgments. Like, I think that he looked significantly different, but I don't want to like gloss over it because I feel like it's important to talk about Quay Rasaw, whose first step off the edge in the limited reps we saw on Tuesday was like electric.
Yeah.
But he looked super small, right? So like, you're like, is that Caden Curry? I'm trying to figure out, and maybe that's just one of the downsides of being in this business where like we're always constantly going, hey, who is this guy? This guy? How does this work? And they obviously can be different. I thought James Smith looked pretty mean. I liked that. But I don't know where to go on this episode because there's so many new faces.
Well, good news. We have another stock watch next Wednesday during spring break. So you just tell me what rules you want. We took a veteran to start with Leroy Roker.
Yeah, because I think that when you talk about veterans, like the next guy is Christian Allegro because he's obviously
not an Ohio State
He's
veteran.
not an Ohio State veteran. He's a transfer.
How dare you take my pick?
I'm going to tell you.
Is this why you asked me to say?
Yeah, well, that's why I had to make the cover. The thing is, like, he's legit 6'5", 245. Like, that's a big kid. And I think the expectation since he transferred to Ohio State was that maybe he ends up being just an edge rusher. But watching him move in space in the red zone drills that you talked about on Tuesday, Snap Judgments, like that's like, oh, kind of different.
Are you ready for this?
I'm ready. Bong, bong.
If you mixed up in a lab Arvell Reese and Pete Warner, I think you might get Christian Allegro.
It's like a copy of a copy. So like it's not
going to be as good necessarily as either one. And here's why. He is not, I don't think he's from the same solar system as Arvell Reese physically.
No, he seems terrestrial.
And I think he is a little bit bigger than Pete Warner. And maybe, definitely, it was watching him in the red zone coverage opportunities. That's like, that play is exactly like Pete Warner in coverage and breaking up that ball in the game and up in Ann Arbor. Like, I think because we know, or we think we know, we've heard from the coaching staff that he can do the edge things, that he will be moved around and do some of the Arvell Reese-like things for Ohio State schematically. Is he Arvell Reese? No. Is taking these couple reps that I saw on Tuesday and extrapolating that over the course of the season going to be as successful as Pete Warner was by the end of his career consistently? I don't know. It's pretty premature for that. I just think that you can take pieces of both of those players' games and Ohio State will find a way to use that. That's not a 10 or 15 snap guy. Again, it's day one.
Yeah.
But I know he was brought in for a reason, and we've seen him over a long period of time at Wisconsin have success in the Big Ten. So that's where I'm at after one practice, not without full pads.
I think that there's going to be a possibility that segments of the fan base will see Christian Allegro and make a straight line to Bo Atkinson as far as like what. Like, okay, he was pretty...
Should he have not worn 14?
He's wearing 14. That he's the same size, basically 6'5", in the 250 range. Coming from a good program that he was somewhat productive at, but like, how's it going to translate? If just the way he ran around, and this is not to dismiss Bo Atkinson, who's still on this team and
he looked good.
Moving a little bit better, looks a little more fluid. But the difference between Bo Atkinson when he got here, he looked overwhelmed early on in his Ohio State career last spring. I did not see a face on Christian Allegro that looked like, whoa, this is different. And that, to me, is the most encouraging thing I saw from him. Obviously, the physical tools are there, the size is there, the way he was defending is there. But like walking into this program and not being shell-shocked or not being like, oh my gosh, I'm at Ohio State. Like, I wouldn't have expected it. Like, Earl Little, like, that's a guy who played at Alabama. He's played at Florida State. Like, he knows. A guy like Allegro, who is not a highly ranked recruit coming out of the Northwest or the Northeast, went to Wisconsin, kind of shuffled around there. He looked the part.
Well, he's played against Ohio State. Like, he wouldn't be overwhelmed necessarily by the athleticism that he's going to face in practice. That's a little bit different than a transfer up or coming from the MAC. No offense to the MAC. We've seen, obviously, Will Kazmarek have that success. We'll see if Mason Williams can duplicate that. But he's competed against Ohio State already. He's got that experience. He played for Luke Fickell.
Who obviously coached here and has a pretty good idea.
And Wisconsin's strength coach, Brady Collins, also came from the Mickey Marotti tree. So all of those things, I think, give him a head start. Again, it is only a start. There's a long way to go. Sure. But if we're investing in the future, I think if there was a notion that that was like a luxury pickup, either as a fourth linebacker or a second edge threat, I don't think that's right.
No, that's a guy that is going to have a role. This is not a spot performer for Ohio State. That's the thing, though. I mean, you look at this defense, and there's so many different ways the alignments can go based on guys like Rasaw, guys like Allegro, guys like Earl Little, Terry Moore, Leroy Roker. Like, I think that this defense has an opportunity to be a lot more multiple than we've seen in the last couple of years. And Matt Patricia wanted to do more of that in 2025, but I don't think all of the pieces were there, or at least not the depth of those pieces. But when you saw Zion Grady, when you see Epi Satanale out there today, they've got a lot of moving parts. And a guy like Allegro who can do all those things, like, that's what you're going to have to do to be a regular performer on this team. Because if you're just a spot player, it's pretty easy to move past you when you've got 14 other guys that can do all the things.
And I think consistency was critical for you with Awaken 180.
I mean, you have to have a plan, and you have to know what you want to do going into the off season. I went into the off season thinking, oh my gosh, I'm fat. And so I decided I need to lose weight. And I took 8 weeks to go on awaken180weightloss.com. They gave me a plan. They gave me an app. They gave me coaching. They gave me a new look at how I eat, why I eat, when I eat. And here I am, almost 7 weeks on maintenance already, still lower than I was when I left the maintenance or the primary part of the diet, the meal plan. So thank you, awaken180weightloss.com. Go there, check it out. And as we're checking out Ohio State, was there a player that you expected to come into on Tuesday's practice and be like, I know I have to see this guy, and then you didn't, and then you were like, oh man, there's so many other guys here that I forgot that player existed? Because to me, it was Chris Henry Jr. And
you told me it was Jeremiah.
Well, it was
Smith.
Jeremiah. After about 30 minutes, I was like, oh, Jeremiah Smith's on this team. But I expected to come out here today and be fully immersed in watching what Chris Henry does, because I want to see what's a fair expectation for him, as I talked about on Talking Tuesday. But by the time we were 45 minutes in, I was like, I forgot that Chris Henry's here. I got to try to get some pictures of him and notice him, because there's so many other guys. And what I wasn't expecting was Kyle Parker and Devin McEwen to be as thick as they were and as explosive as they were in short area spaces.
Why are you just taking all of the guys that
we haven't talked about this? We don't script these shows. If you want to take them, you can ante up. I'm just saying those two.
That's why we don't script it, because you asked me who I was going to pick, and now you've taken them all.
I've gone into this offseason fully expecting that there's a real opportunity for Chris Henry Jr. to be wide receiver 2.5 on this team.
Yeah,
and I leave Tuesday's practice going, it's not necessary. And I think that is great for Chris Henry Jr. And I think everything we've heard about him in the 8 weeks that he's been here have been nothing but great news. And I think if you can go into the spring and remove some of the pressure and remove some of the expectations, I think that only bodes extremely well for Chris, who absolutely physically is insane.
He is, but he's not a finished product yet. I mean, he's only had 2 months in this building, in this weight room. And I tried to make that point that it's fair to have high expectations for his career, and I think premature to expect that it's going to happen by the time that they play Texas, or that he's going to dominate the spring game. I don't know, and I'll be happy to be wrong about that. And if I am, then I'll throw up my hand and be the first to admit it. But it's more to what you're describing, where if Chris Henry is afforded the luxury to be Jeremiah Smith's backup this year, that, yes, by the end of Marvin Harrison's freshman year, he was able to elevate, and we saw what Jackson did, and it took 8 or 9 games before Garrett Wilson.
If Ohio State's in a Rose Bowl, it doesn't matter next January. Then Chris Henry Jr. is in a position to do exactly what Marvin did, because Marvin and Jackson didn't have to go out there early in their careers and get beat up or lose confidence, so they were just able to build.
I'm not really entertaining the notion of a meaningless bowl game for Ohio State, as talented as they are, but I think my point is that if he doesn't have to be the Carnell Tate replacement and he gets to be the heir apparent for Jeremiah Smith, which you can say, there's a world where both of those things are true. I think that that's better for the long-term development, and again, if that does not bear itself out as the track that he's on, then that will be a tribute to his work ethic and his athleticism and his ability to learn the offense and handle all the responsibilities. But the flip side of that is also, we don't know what the tweaks are going to be. We know that the physical profile of Devin McEwen, Kyle Parker, even Brandon Ennis right now, Legend Bay, if we throw him into that group, is different than what Ohio State has had on the perimeter in the past. And, I don't know that any of those three are capable of going to play like Carnell Tate, but Devin McEwen is as explosive as anybody I've seen step on this field for one day of practice.
It looks different than what we've seen. Again, I'm going back to healthy combination of Paris Campbell and Terry McLaurin and Johnny Dixon, and KJ Hill, even to a degree, where you look at Brandon Ennis and McEwen and Parker and you go, I can't really tell the difference between the three.
Yeah.
And that's good, because then you can do all kinds of things when you have Jeremiah Smith on the outside. And again, the Chris Henry discussion is not meant to overlook Phillip Bell, who I think is going to be a sensational college football player at some point. He's going to have to earn it, because it's not going to be handed to you here in that room. But Ryan Day saying that this is as deep a receiver room he's ever had, when in 2021 there was 5 first-round picks at wide receiver. Obviously, that is a more talented group in 2021, but now you have a deeper group beyond them. And I think that that's exciting it's got to be for Cortez Hankton, because he has some luxury to tinker and figure out who fits where, how they best do that, but then also be able to bring along Chris Henry, Jerquaden Gilford, Brock Boyd, and to a lesser degree, Jaden Ricketts on their own timeline, and not feel like you have to rush them in. Because I'm telling you, Brock Boyd is a bad boy. Dude. Okay? He's a bad boy. There's some dudes. And this Brian Hartline's departing gift to Ohio State was this wide receiver class. And I'm telling you, the fact that none of them are going to be necessary this year, based on what we saw on Tuesday, is a real win for the program.
Yeah, and I'll fully admit as well, we did not see Devin McEwen in a situation where he could be hit, Kyle Parker in a situation where he could be hit, although for Parker specifically, he has 30-plus catches for LSU and against SEC opponents, so there's not a real uncertainty about whether he can handle that or not. But, it's early, it's day one, but when we get new information, we talk about it on the Stock Watch.
Anybody else that today that you that you feel like if you don't mention them, you're going to be regretting it?
Well, you talked about Edric's physical transformation or ongoing. I think sometimes people get tired of us talking about it, and I feel like last year, speaking for myself, we took it too far. It created maybe unrealistic expectations and pressure on Edric Houston that he wasn't ready for. I mean, he has to be ready for it now. And I think that the Ohio State coaches will be the first to admit that. If they don't get what they thought they could out of Edric a year ago, then this team will be obviously a lesser version of the defense and not the number one defense in the country. So I thought that was pretty impressive. Hunter Welsing, I think, is a pretty intriguing option for Ohio State. Yeah. I'm trying to think of actual competitive opportunities that we saw on day one. There weren't a lot, but in the red zone, the tight end group collectively was targeted a lot by Julian saying. So Nate Roberts had a touchdown down there. Hunter Welsing had a touchdown. Mason Williams had a catch down there. That group, I think, is very interesting.
The fact that Ryan Day actually mentioned Max LeBlanc as a guy that, he's a guy that a lot of people have just written off as when is he going to walk out of the program. Ryan Day bringing him up as specifically saying that's a guy who's had a good offseason. And I looked at him. I actually thought, when I saw him, I thought it was Max Williams, because I didn't for some reason 88 didn't process in my head, and I thought, well, this must be one of the new guys. Mason Williams, sorry. So I'm like, that. I thought it was Mason Williams. I was like, that's Max LeBlanc. I did not really anticipate that. The other guy for me, and I'm stealing your thunder here a little bit, even though it's my thunder first. There is a nastiness to TJ Alford that I really like. And just watching it, in punching the ball out drills. Like, that dude is bringing some aggression.
Yeah.
And this is an opportunity, again, with Riley Pettijohn limited this spring. Like, I wonder if TJ Alford is a guy that's going to shock some people, because you don't go down to Miami and recruit the best linebacker in the state of Florida and be surprised when he's like angry and fast. But I'm telling you, there's a rise going there, and I would like to purchase the stock that is left, because TJ Alford is worth mentioning today.
Yeah, there's not a lot of it left because I've been snatching it up throughout this offseason. And look, it doesn't mean that Riley Pettijohn can't make up that ground when he's full go again, and by the time you get to training camp,
he was the number one linebacker in the country for a reason.
And he will be. And Ohio State's going to need all of them, but there's also, we have seen in the past, guys get spring opportunities, get reps that they weren't ordinarily going to get, and just take off in the growth curve. They zip right through it. So we'll see if that winds up happening for him, but there's a long way to go. There's 14 more practices. We'll be back in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center on Thursday for day 2. We'll have another hour viewing period. We'll have some more snap judgments before the Buckeyes take that spring break. So looking forward to that and your questions.
Get your questions in to the austinandbermshow@gmail.com. Also, go to lettermanrow.com if you want like written stuff, photos from Tuesday. That's all there, all on the website, lettermanrow.com. You can find it there. But
this has been a Stock Watch on the Beat, presented by the Waterworks and Hetter Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing. And he is Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. We have a lot more Ohio State coverage coming your way at 97.1 The Fan and 10 TV. We will see you there.